you're supposed to be really interested in gardening. You're not supposed to be sitting there reading. How are you?
Glow. I'm not relaxing. This is Wuthering Heights.
Oh, this is work, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I can just hear a lot of people saying, oh yes, he loves the garden, but I bet he just pays a gardener to do it. Or, I mean, do you actually like getting out there?
Well, I mean, I do pay a gardener, and of course he does most of the sort of heavy work here. I mean, everything you see really is based on what he does, but I quite like being able to prune things and deadhead things and, like, decide to have a new bed there, which I did decide, and then he digs it up. So, I mean, but I do like gardening, yeah.
So you like all the planning, the plotting, if you like?
Yes, I mean, I think that's an interesting part of a good old English garden for me. Our garden isn't very formal. We do have beds, but they're kind of higgledy-piggledy beds. I mean, we have everything growing in every bed, and I quite like that. And the other thing about an English garden is to have things that grow tall, you know, delphiniums and foxgloves and things like that. So it's been fun, actually, to find spots in the garden. And what I like about this garden is that there are nooks and crannies. Yes, there's the pool area, but alongside it and separated by the pergola, you've got a little rose garden. They've all got different characters. They look quite different, and it's just a perfect place to be. And they're all different little areas. There's a pond with a stream that goes down between two ponds, and there's a woodland, all in 3 acres.
And
so,
you've got two very active dogs that ward all the neighbours off.
They ward off golfers. In point of fact, we have known before the hedge really got thick over there, quite often we'd find a golfer on the lawn getting his ball back. So they like to sit over there on just where the crest of the lawn is, and they sit there looking through the hedge, and any glimpse of golfers, and they go stark raving bonkers down to the hedge. I mean, no one's terrified of Westies, but at least it lets people know that dogs are actually hanging around this place.
How much are you able to relax in the garden? I mean, apart from the work that you do in it?
Oh, a lot. I think for me, well, for anybody, I guess, any garden for any person is a great, it's a source of therapy, isn't it? I mean, I just love it. There are times when the house is empty, and if I've got a day off, I'll be the only one here. Mick will be around gardening somewhere, but I don't always see him. He'll be perhaps in the woodland, and I can sit out there by the pool, have the doors open, put on a CD, and just sit quietly and read, and maybe have some toast and tea out there early in the morning or whatever. And yeah, I like sitting around a garden. There is something very gentle and soothing. I tell you, I pinch myself regularly. I open my bedroom curtains every morning, and I make myself look out and go, because it doesn't matter what time of the year it is, it always looks fantastic. It just always looks good. And you know, I'm very lucky, really, to think that I lived in a council house in Cheshunt, and here I am talking to Gloria Hunniford on television. I mean, it really is. It takes a lot of believing sometimes, honestly. I still haven't entirely become totally accustomed to all that's happened to me.
And why do you think that is? Is it just to do with your nature, do you think?
Well, I think most of the time, I suppose all of us, we have different characteristics and different types of natures. And I guess, I don't know, I had a very good family background. My parents, fortunately, until my father died, were together and still very close. So I had the family background was very strong. The fact that we were poverty-stricken and lived in a council house, and originally when we moved into the council house, we slept on the floor, mattresses on floors, because we couldn't afford beds. And I may be repeating myself here, but I have told people this before, but my father made the first 2 armchairs that we had. And so we went through all of that, and maybe that has added, the fact that I'll never be able to forget that. And therefore, the things that have come to me via fame and wealth, I have never stopped appreciating it. I don't think I ever will.
So as we're sitting in your garden, let's have a picture of what the garden was like in that council house. What did your parents grow in that garden?
Not a lot. My father wasn't a great gardener, and I have to say that although I love gardening now and gardens, at that time, when I was 10 or 11 when we got that council house, maybe even just a little bit, no, it was, I was either 10 or 11 years old, and we had a kind of corner house, and so therefore it was quite a large patch, really. It wasn't just a little backyard, it was quite a large patch, and it was L-shaped around the house. And my father tried everything to get me interested in it, forced me sometimes to dig the garden up with him, and I think the only thing we ever grew in there was potatoes. Occasionally my father would really plant some potatoes in one section of the garden, and the rest would be knee-deep in grass. So we weren't great gardeners, but my father had green fingers. I can remember coming back from somewhere once with a little tiny rose on a stalk, and my father said, "Oh, don't throw that out, don't throw it out," and he took the top of the rose off really carefully. There was just one little leaf left, and and he stuck it 90% into the soil and watered it carefully. And I remember that thing grew up the side of our front door, and it was fantastic. So he obviously had a knack. I don't think I'd have contemplated buying this house if it hadn't had a tennis court on it already. Oh, this is it.
Lovely
the tennis
statues
court
as well.
Oh, and yeah, well, it's nice to find those kind of things and stick them in corners, I always think.
Actually, it's all very secluded around here, isn't
It's
it?
fantastic, it's wonderful. And of course, a tennis court's not exactly a pretty place. I mean, there's horrible net around, but you can grow things up it. I mean, look at that. It's called a Campsis radicans. And it
Well,
has...
that's impressive.
I know, isn't it good? It's the only one I know. But it has this lovely kind of lobster claw kind of orangey flower, which we've only seen once, actually. And that's it. My sister Donna bought me that. She and her husband came round. And I think it's made of box hedging.
This is very unusual.
Yeah, it's cut into the shape of... Now, that's a job for me, you see. Now, I reckon I can keep that into that shape.
With your manicuring scissors.
Yeah, with my special little clippers that I've got.
Now, listen, why did you do the court blue?
Well, I had to have it resurfaced, and the guy came to me and said, here's the colour chart, and there was blue and gold. And I said, well, can I have a blue court with a gold surround? And he nearly fell over, and I thought, has no one ever asked for this before? And the other thing I thought was, of course, if anybody was flying over, it would match the swimming pool. The blue and the blue, you know.
Actually, you really, really do adore your tennis, don't you?
I do, I love it. I mean, I came to it kind of late in life. You know, we've all picked up rackets in the past, I guess, but when I was at school, it was definitely a girls' game. You know, I played rugby, football, but not tennis, because you wouldn't even be seen dead carrying a racket. Well, of course, all that's changed now. And about 15, 16 years ago, I started to take tennis seriously. You know, girls will play on the forehand court, and then once they get it, the boys stand there waiting, hoping like mad the ball will come to them, because they just hit the ball backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And the other thing and it is what's wrong with this court, is it should be 5 feet perhaps longer at each end, because a lob onto the line on this court, it's a dead winner, because you run up the back and your racket scrapes right up the netting. And but it's an interesting court, and it's a good social court. I mean, you get good tennis on it, lots of laughs and lots of long rallies, because they just hit the ball backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And the other thing and it is what's wrong with this court, is it should be 5 feet perhaps longer at each end, because a lob onto the line on this court, it's a dead winner, because you run up the back and your racket scrapes right up the netting. And but it's an interesting court, and it's a good social court. I mean, you get good tennis on it, lots of laughs and lots of long rallies. Changed now. And about 15, 16 years ago, I started to take tennis seriously. As I say, I'd hit balls over the net, you know, but the minute I started taking some coaching, and every now and then you hit a really good topspin backhand, it feels so fantastic, you know, and I thought it's worth learning how to do it properly. And the enjoyment we get, and this court, you know, is actually quite a slow court, which means at the standard that my friends and I play, we get long, long rallies. Usually, you know, girls will play on the forehand court, and then once they get it, the boys stand there waiting, hoping like mad the ball will come to them, because they just hit the ball backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And the other thing and it is what's wrong with this court, is it should be 5 feet perhaps longer at each end, because a lob onto the line on this court, it's a dead winner, because you run up the back and your racket scrapes right up the netting. And but it's an interesting court, and it's a good social court. I mean, you get good tennis on it, lots of laughs and lots of long rallies. En route to the pond, of course, this is what we call the orchard. It's only because we've got 2 apple trees and a pear tree. But we know what we're talking about when we say, but this is fantastic.
Wonderful.
Yes, I mean, I'll really impress you. It's called a Leptospermum damask rose.
Right, I'll take your word for it.
Well, it's interesting. I think damask rose is merely the colour of it, but the stems seem to be jam-packed with tiny mini roses. It's fantastic.
I've never seen this before, actually. Is it very rare?
I don't know that it's rare, but we bought it just because it was recommended. And it was a tiny little thing about 1 foot high, and over the last, say, 6 years, it's grown and grown and grown. And since it bloomed really well, which was about 2 years ago, it seems to have spread out even wider, and I've yet to find how to cut it. I'm terrified of cutting it and finding that it doesn't like being cut.
I'm the same. I don't like cutting anything back.
No,
I just
well,
want
I
to let
don't
it
mind
grow
cutting
wild.
things. I mean, we got a willow tree, which I'll show you later, and it was hacked to stumpy levels.
These are the prettiest roses, aren't
They're
they?
nice. They're called, well, the ballerina. We had a disaster around the back because the wind came up during the summer last year. They're all grafted, and they're kind of grafted like knuckles. And these stems get really heavy, and the wind blasted through, and it broke my heart, 2 huge lumps of these roses just cracked off. So our only hope is that the stems that are green and growing will then send up new shoots, and we can fill in the holes. But they're lovely.
So this then is the orchard?
This, laughingly, is the orchard. I mean, we have got apple. I mean, there are apple. Look, there's apples growing on here. And now I have to say, I do claim that the success of this apple tree this year will be because I went around pruning it, but also it had thousands of little apples, and someone had said to me, if you take some of the apples away and just leave one or two, then all the strength will go into those. So we actually have quite a nice apple here.
Do you know, by every second you're sounding more of an expert. Now we're off to Fountain Pond, are we?
Yes.
See, actually, these statues of them, I just passed comment. You have them everywhere, and I love them.
Well, I like going to the Hampton Court Palace Flower Show, and one of the nice things about going there is that you can buy things as you see them. And there was a company from, I think from Devon, certainly West Country, and I'd already been looking for statues, and I'd found a couple of statues, but when I saw them and asked the price, they said 45,000 each, sir. Wow. I played it really cool, Gloria. You've been proud of me. I said, have you got 4? Knowing full well they didn't have 4. And they said, no, we've only got 2. I said, oh, I'm looking for 4. So I went, and that year at Hampton Court Palace Flower Show, I found hand-carved stone statues, spring, summer, autumn and winter. And I picked them up, and they didn't cost 45,000.
Actually, you can often find the most marvellous artefacts at Hampton Court. Actually, some of them are absolutely enormous.
They are. They're fantastic looking fish. I mean, I find them everywhere. I mean, there's a beautiful blue one. It's got a black spine, sky blue back, there he is in the middle, and orange undercarriage. And I found him in Birmingham. When I was doing a concert in Birmingham, I went round to a garden centre, and there he was. And he apparently is one of the most expensive fish we have in this pond. He's merely, I don't know. I can't, but somebody said to me that he would be the most valuable one in there.
But are like hundreds of pounds?
Oh yeah, he'd be hundreds, and in fact, yes, many hundreds. I mean, some of them, we've got a fantastic deal when we bought some of them actually. There was one place, privately owned, well, it's not privately owned anything, it was a home, and do you fancy feeding them?
Oh yes.
They won't come when they're called, but if Moby comes out, there's a Moby in here, Moby because he's the biggest one.
And do you know all their names?
Well, we've got names for all of them, yeah. There's that gold one in the middle there, he's called Odd Job. Kind of roundabout way of getting that name, because we thought Goldfinger, no, that doesn't sound right. And Jill said, what about Odd Job? So we called him Odd Job. The big white one there is known as Old Blue Eyes. He's Frankie, because he's got blue eyes. And the one with the orange that's sucking water now, here he comes. This one is called Hot Lips, because if you look at him now, look at his top lip.
What, Hot Lips Hoolan?
Yeah, it's just he looks like he's got lipstick on. And he's amazing, because in the summer, he actually goes on his back and flips himself right across the top of the pond. But
do you find it quite relaxing watching them?
Yes, it is. I mean, you could sit here quite comfortably for hours.
People often talk about nature being very close to God and contemplation and being very spiritual. Does it affect you that way, being in the garden?
It does. I've often felt that I've done some of my best praying in the garden. I don't know what it is, but there is a calming effect. You know, we've used the word therapy many times, and there's a mental release when you sit down in the woods and there's nothing happening, you know, and you're just there and there's birds twittering around the place. You do get close to nature. And, you know, nature is I think one of the best examples of God's existence. This is not created by people. You know, this was, and it's pretty ugly, you know, you just jump off it into the pool. I mean, it has a function, but when you compare that to what we've been wandering around, I mean, there's nothing to compare with what God actually placed for us to enjoy. So yeah, that is very much part of my life, the fact that I've often sat in those woods and my time of prayer has been somehow heightened because of being close to what He has created for us.
Well, Cliff, I'd like to thank you very much indeed for spending your time off with us. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Any chance the bar might open?
That's where you started. You might as well finish there. Let's go on. Actually, it's quite a nice bar, actually.
Was this your idea to put all the names and everything in?
Yes, I suddenly thought, what a nice...
At 10:30 tomorrow here on BBC One, Gloria talks.